But now let's get started with our first keynote presentation of this afternoon. So I believe it is true that looking for the right person for the right job is still a big challenge. So the job of tomorrow may not even be created today. So that alone is indeed a big challenge. So more than ever before, organizations need inspirational and exceptional leaders. Now, what exactly is an exceptional leader? What are the skills and the qualities that he needs, and how to select him? Well, that will be the first topic that will be presented in our keynote presentation, and therefore I have the pleasure to invite two charming gentlemen that will be addressing us from Paris. And you see their pictures. It's Laurent Ledoux, who is the managing partner at Fusis, and we will also talk to Marc de Leritz. He's managing director, board and CEO advisory partners at Russell Reynolds Associates. So both gentlemen are waiting for us in Paris. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. I'm very happy to be with you and to be with my friend Marc de Leritz, who has just written a book, not yet published, about exceptional leaders, as you say, or at least the leaders of the future. And we thought interesting for this summit to invite Marc to share with us his exceptional experience in this field, since he has been a headhunter for many, many years, if not decades. And so I will directly give him the floor and ask you, Marc, indeed, in those very difficult and uncertain times, what does it mean to be a good leader?
Well, thank you all. And, we all wish we were together physically, but we'll do our best taking advantage of this technology. As you were saying, Laurent, I've been for the past 20 years advising boards on one of the most crucial decisions they have to make, which is which CEO to appoint. And it's a very crucial decision, as you all know, because it's not only about filling a job, which is already something quite difficult. It's about finding the person who will reshape the future of the company in many years, for many years. And what has been striking in my practice over the past few years is that I find that my job in terms of aligning a board about what it is they need to fulfill the assignment, the mission of the company, is getting more and more difficult and unclear. And I find that the upfront work I have to do, which sometimes lasts for months, in terms of aligning the chairman of the NOMCO and the other committees and the full board, is becoming increasingly difficult and increasingly crucial. And that's how I decided to write a book about it, because the old rules don't apply anymore. By and large, I think the main framework I'd like to propose to you is that in a world which has become so uncertain, I don't want to speak about VUCA, which you know all very well, but the important point that in such an uncertain world, you need to make a decision whether you decide that you lead by the events as they come, depending on the weather. If you take a ship metaphor, and the weather is changing every day, and you do zigzags all over the place, and it's harming your company, it's harming society. Or you decide that you realize that this is a time when there is no maps, there are no maps anymore, no GPS, no compasses, and therefore you need to take a long term view of things, a little bit like Christopher Columbus, when he was asked by Queen Isabel, where are you going? He said, well, I want to go to sail full speed towards the west. I know, which is what he thought, I will find the Indies, but that's the only thing I know. And he was carried by his dream and by his long-term goal, and the rest is, history and legend. And I would say many of the companies, large, not only companies, but also large organizations, are in this situation to make a bet, to take a long-term view, and have leaders who have the guts and the vision to do it. So, what are these features that you would look in such a leader? I would say number one, and I will mention three, is somebody who really has got a thorough understanding of the whole system, of a systemic view of the world. I find it very striking in many boards where I sit advising them on their efficiency and their decisions, to hear that they see big risks, the geopolitical risks, the climate risk, the cyber security risk, the monetary risk. You know the list is very long. What is very striking is when we were in board meetings back 10 years ago, the risks that were discussed were primarily about operations or business. Here, they're all what I would call macro risks, which are huge. Nobody can manage them really, but they're all up on us. Nassim Taleb, the Lebanese author, called them the black swans. So we are here in front of these black swans, and it's really important for board members and CEOs and their leadership teams to understand that the future is really unpredictable. And because it's unpredictable and potentially lethal, as the pandemic has shown, it's important to be continuously trying to understand the links between the whole dimensions of the world. I recently was speaking to the board member of one of our large car makers, and he was telling me the reason why we are in such a shamble is because we have always considered that the company is what is in between the four walls of our factories, whereas we depend on so many other factors, on society, on climate, on finance. And if you don't open up, if you don't realize that you are responsible for the whole and not only for the single unit, then you become really blind and irresponsible. I think the term of responsibility is really important in this time. I would say a great leader, as Laurent, you're saying, an exceptional leader, is a leader who feels that he is responsible for the future. And this is a big shift. Most of the people I see don't speak in terms of responsibility, they speak in terms of liability. So I'm not liable for what happens in California in terms of the fires, or in Australia or in Amazonas. I'm not liable for the climate change. And they are right in a way. Nobody is liable for anything in terms of all these disasters which are happening around us. So none of us is liable, but we can decide to be responsible for the future. So we make sure that our kids have got a future, that our humanity has got a future. So I would say the first thing I would look in a leader at the time of interviewing her or him, sometimes for hours, typically I would spend between 15 and 20 hours with a CEO candidate in several interviews, is have they got the sense that they are responsible for far more than the single entity they are applying to lead. Number one. Number two is about culture. You really, because it's an ethical topic in a way, what do I feel responsible for? The more I go, the more I feel that ESG, or call it, social responsibility, is about culture. And there are a few things which are important to have in mind here. One is to move from an ego-systemic view, which is about to me, to an ecosystemic view where I really feel that I'm responsible for far more. For instance, recently, in the process of drafting the book, I sent a first copy of it to the CEO of one of the largest European banks. And he was telling me about his relationship with Facebook. And he was telling me, I recently banned Facebook because I feel that some of the practices are not good for us. So I'm not using them anymore as a partner. And I tried that other people in the banking industry would do the same, but they did not. And he resented it because saying, if we had worked with Facebook, meaning if I take a broader view of stakeholders capitalism, if my peers had considered that they have a responsibility not only for the institution, but also for their suppliers and their customers, by the way, and their regulators. In other words, if we all feel responsible for each other, and sometimes having to fight, but fight for a greater good, then the world will be going further. So I think it's a first important point in cultural shift is have everybody in an organization, everybody, every single line worker feeling that he is or she is deeply rooted in an ecosystem, maybe at the other end of the world, and that he has to be equipped to deal with it. So that's one vision, one aspect of the culture. Another aspect of the cultural change is purpose. So now purpose, you see the word everywhere. Makes me sick to see it all over the place. And I think we should all organize to have a strong, honest, relentless conversation about culture, about purpose. I was recently speaking with a chairman of a large retail organization, several 100,000 people working for them. And he said, my job is to be talking to the heads of the several regions and the several countries. It's a global company, and have a conversation about purpose. And so I said, what do you mean purpose? I see purpose statements all over the place, and they are like, candies, very nice. They are on bright posters, but it's odd hair. How do you do? He said, I'm very tough on my people. I've got 3 questions for them. Number 1, what is the value you are adding to your ecosystem? I need to understand that clearly. And I see some of the divisions I'm looking at are really more and more failing to deliver a value to the ecosystem. He's involved in particular in selling clothes. In Europe, you see that the average life of a t-shirt is 30 days. Big impact on CO2, big impact on slave work, big impact on kids' work. So do we need to change our t-shirts every 32 days? Or can we do something differently? So he's shaking his people to say, what is the real value? What's the value of changing a t-shirt every month? And remember, it's the guy selling them. The first question, what's the real value you're adding to the world? Second question, what is the business model you are putting in place to do it? If I take a very different industry, take the solar industry, which is a very useful industry for the world. But if you see most of the US companies in solar energy have gone bankrupt. I was talking recently to the CEO of one of those, CEO and owner. He told me it took me 12 different versions of the business model to come up with something which really would fly. So second question is, how do you reinvent the business model that are really strong for the future? And the last one is about vitality, still about culture, is I would just use here one word, which is subsidiarity. How do you make sure, and I'm sure that Laurent, you've spoken about that earlier in the day, how do you make sure that people take ownership of whatever they need to do, and how do they collaborate to do it? So how do you create a collaborative governance? How do you create subsidiarity, a sense of ownership and responsibility? So it's the second thing, is people who are able to shift the culture, at least in the 3 directions I mentioned, which is again, ecosystem to ecosystem, purpose, and subsidiarity. And then that leads us to the third question, to the third dimension, which is what kind of competencies, what kind of man or woman are you looking for? And here, I really believe in one word, which is alignment. Alignment between doing and being. Let's look a little bit at those 2. In terms of doing, I believe many of you are very open to understanding competency models and competencies in general. For a long time, I felt that competencies were like a sport, so you need to jump. How high do you jump is the question. The more I look at this, it's not about jumping high only, not only being good at strategy, for instance, or good at influencing or yielding results. It's about balancing a number of paradoxical dimensions. For instance, taking strategy. You would expect a leader to be in this world, depending on this industry, but to be a disruptive leader. But if he's too disruptive, he will disrupt his own company and just let it die. So he needs to be at the same time disruptive and pragmatic. So in my job, I would be looking for the right balance between the two. Same for people leadership. I want somebody who is charismatic because he has to be creating energy in the company, but at the same time, I'm looking for vulnerability. So he's open to others, open to feedback, open to being seen as vulnerable. And we need both. So on the doing side of things, on the doing of the leader, you want to be looking for paradoxical leaders who can balance different competencies, which seemingly are like opposing to each other. But it's not enough. And what I've been discovering for the past few years is that you need to go deeper under the surface, below, at the bottom of the iceberg. And here you discover things which are a little bit too long to describe in this setting. But I would say, for instance, what is your motivation? What makes you get up in the morning? A key point for me, I'm looking for that constantly, is the notion of a servant leadership. If you're not a servant leadership, if you're here just to get rich or to get powerful or to get visible, then you are just incapable to have this long-term route that I was mentioning to start. I'm looking also at forms of intelligence. I'm really looking for people who can make sense of very different realities, who can at the same time juggle with performance, which is the average, leader in our setting is about performance, financial performance. But I want more. I want the ability to create rules, to change a culture, to look after people, to develop people. So a number of dimensions, call it the triple P, performance or profit, people, and planet, an ability to encompass a number of dimensions, which usually business leaders fail to grab, saying, it's too complicated, Mark, it's too short, it's too long term, I have no time, I want to look at my return on equity and put a few bonuses to people who go beyond the return on equity, and I've done my job. My feeling is that in the world which is coming, this is not enough. It's less than not enough. It will precipitate our capitalist system in shambles. So that's how I would put it, Laurent, to your question, what's an exceptional leader? So I would say it's somebody who is able to take the long-term view and has one of the strong ethos to do it, an ethics of responsibility, number one. Number two, an ability to be taking on a very difficult task to make a transition in culture. And number three, who is deeply aligned and coherent, congruent, as you would say, between his doing and his being. Now, this is not solving everything, because it's about the whole system needing to shift. And so there is an element of bet in it, because we all know, we see it, and Laurent and I have been, lamenting it, that the good guy doesn't always win, right? We are still in a world where the bad guy wins. We have got, the US president is a great example of that so far. But meaning that the good guys, meaning people who have got to this vision, need to take a bet. And sometimes they will lose the bet because the people will take the short-term view or the cynical view will succeed. So that's, my final appeal is to say, given this element of bet that is needed for our system to shift, for the paradigm in which we are living to change, I would say that we need an alliance of people who see this and help the world and people to become, greener and with more life and a brighter future.
Thank you very much, Mark. In fact, what you say echoes a lot what I personally believe, and that's no wonder. But really, I would like to tie it very concretely with what we do when we try to install a collaborative governance. And I would like to hear your reactions to this. When you say, okay, we need leaders who understand the world in a systemic way, I think you're right. And definitely when we move towards a collaborative governance, basically what we do is to transform the organization in a system which coordinates itself organically. So that's the wonder of moving from a hierarchy of people towards a hierarchy of purpose. And of course, this doesn't mean that you don't need leaders anymore, but you need to distribute leadership. So I would say that to answer your first criteria, you will need leaders who understand that to be a good leader is also to distribute leadership and not to take it for themselves, but really to make sure that it's distributed. And this relates to your second point about the culture, where you say basically create an organization where everybody feels responsible, which also means that you need to change the system in a way that the hierarchy is not basically blocking the initiatives of people, but instead liberating them. And there, you mentioned also the fact that you need to have clear purposes. And you mentioned value, business model, vitality. Fully agree. If you want, basically when we say we move from a hierarchy of people towards a hierarchy of purpose, it is exactly what you say. So the purpose needs to be understood by everybody within the organization and declined at the various levels so that everybody's got his own purpose to contribute to the greater purpose of the teams to which he or she belongs, or to the big organization. And then when you talk about paradoxes, I also recognize very much what we are going through when we put in place a collaborative governance. The CEO who takes the leadership to implement a collaborative governance needs to resolve the following paradox, is that it requires a strong decision, almost an autocratic one, to decide to follow this path towards a collaborative governance. You cannot decide collaboratively, or it's very difficult in a larger organization to move in this direction. And so you need to be able to live with that paradox. So I relate totally to with what you said. My question then for you, would be first, how do you react to this? And how have you seen, or have you chosen leaders who can implement this within the organization? And basically then, how do you find them? Where are they, those leaders able to move in those directions?
In this very rich, response, Laurent, I would pick one point, which is for me crucial, which is, what is leadership? And as you know, you've got probably 1 million definitions here hanging around on Google. And I would say here that it's a process more than a person. It's a process through which a man or a woman, or even a child, I have kids as a Boy Scout leading a patrol of six kids, is a leader as well. So it's a process by which a man, a woman, or a child is having an influence on a group of people without which some things would not happen. Mm-hmm. If you take this definition, you can see it's a very broad definition. It's a very non-elistic definition of it, very democratic. So that's the point I want to take in your response, which is, and that's where the shift is how do you look at the people you see? If you've got, as you're saying, this hierarchy of people versus this hierarchy of purpose, you just see that, power and money and titles rule. If you say, I need a process which is going to be triggering massive levels of engagement and energy and vitality and innovation and collaboration, if I've got that key to unlock all this, more than a nuclear power of a group, so I would say the people I'm looking for are people who can do that. Doesn't mean they need to go to a French grande école. I would say, being a Boy Scout is probably more useful for that. And there are many ways to do this. If you say, well, for instance, Laurent, the world of the trade unions. Trade unionism, I don't know it too much in Belgium, but I see it in France, has got this problem, obviously, but has got full of vitality, which we can learn from. Religious organizations as well, NGOs as well. So if you look around the world, starting by looking at a forest, you'll see, to take on your word of organicism, there is a life. Or look at the way this virus is growing, or look at the way our towns are growing. You see all around you that life is ready to spring all over the place. And the reason why so many of our organizations are stuck in bureaucracy and internal silos and wars is because you've got too many people who are in a position where they're just making that the system gets stuck. So to these people, and they're usually the people who have got the leader title on their business cards, is to tell them, step aside, take a different role, trust and power. And you'll see that your life is going to be far easier. You'll work more, you'll work less, you'll have less worries, and you'll see life springing all around you, and your companies resurrecting, actually, whereas at the moment they're dying because they're just bureaucracies. So step aside. When people are saying, I don't understand why the grass is green all over the place except under my feet, I say, well, just move 2 meters away and you'll see it's going to be green again. So, I'm probably a terrible headhunter because I feel that these talents don't exist much, and anyway, if they exist, it would be really detrimental to go and snap them to put them somewhere else. I think the message I want to give here is just make the hard and very fulfilling work to develop them, and they will grow and everything will spring back to life.
Exactly. I fully agree with you. So there is a big shift then indeed in headhunting, let's say. It would be less about snapping them outside, but letting them grow within your company. And once again, pleading for what we do at Fusys, it's really creating a system within the organization which fosters that allows people to emerge within the organization in a very organic way, of course, with training and coaching and all the rest, but really making sure that people can grow within the company. Now, the question is, do you have any suggestions on what can help those people grow within the organization besides the putting in place of a governance like the one we propose? Do you see other ways for those people to transform themselves? Because what we believe inherently is that the move towards such a governance cannot go without a change within the people's posture at every level, and starting with the top management. So you in your job as a headhunter or as a coach of CEOs, how do you invite them or help them to move in this direction?
Well, first, I don't know if I'm really well placed or as well placed as you are to answer that, right? Because I'm a hunter and you are a gardener.
Yes.
As I'm listening to you, I say I probably should change my job and join Fusys as a gardener.
Yes, yes, definitely.
To this, I would say the following, but this one is a difficult one, which is what I'm trying to explore in this book is to say you need to hold together two things. One is to be able to expand your vision, really expand, take a world vision, because your action, whatever you do, your action is having world consequences. You have got a Chinese guy eating a pangolin for lunch somewhere and in China, and the planet is just dying after. So whatever you do, you take your plastic glass to drink, you're adding yourself to the long list of people who are harming the planet. So there is a sense of belonging to something huge and trying to make sense of it. I think this is really important for our leaders and for our kids. I've got the privilege to be raising 10 kids. That's right. The key thing I try to teach them is feel responsible for something far bigger than just your own small life.
Right.
So look big. And at the same time, look deep, meaning that if you do not change yourself, if you do not align yourself by the ability to be dealing with paradoxical dimensions of your job, if you are not in line in terms of being a servant, in terms of being somebody who can incorporate very different, apparently antagonistic dimensions of organizations or families or cities, if you don't do that, which means you need to work permanently on yourself in terms of self-awareness, in terms of self-control, you will not go anywhere. So you need to be holding two together, the vast, very huge system and the very deep of yourself, and move the two together.
Right. Now, I think we need to have a Q&A now. I don't know, can somebody tell me how we can view those questions, if there are any at this stage? So I do not see, maybe Anne might want to raise some questions that she has received through the chat. Personally, I don't see them yet. Anne, do you have any questions received from the people? Yes? Yes, Anne.
Yes, I don't know if you can hear me, Laurent and Mark. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, yes, okay. Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
So indeed, we had some questions received through the chat. One of them, for instance, is: do leaders transform themselves, or does the organization transform them? So that was a good one, I think.
Yeah, that's it. I will very quickly answer. I do believe it's a combination of both, and I'm sure, Mark, you will probably agree, but I will let you answer then. Definitely, as I said earlier, I believe there is a need for a leader at the top who really wants to change the organization and is ready to commit to that. But then, indeed, the transformation of the organization itself will allow the development of people within the organization. So it's a virtuous circle, I would say. Mark, what would you say to this?
Yeah, to confirm on that, Laurent, maybe share a story. I was having dinner with a chairman and CEO of one of the largest oil company in the world, European one, and I was telling him, I didn't know him. So at the end of the dinner, I just shared with him a few impressions I had about him. I say, well, you're like this, this is striking to me. And I described a few of the traits which I captured during that time. And he, very humbly took on that it was quite a complimentary feedback. He took it on, and he said, it's really interesting because we recently did a survey, an appraisal of our top 200 people. And he had been CEO for more than 10 years. And I realized and I asked that they would aggregate the 200 people into one synthetic profile of the typical guy for our company. And this person was looking exactly as you described. And that conference that you're saying, Laurent, which is after a while, the company looks like his leader and the leader looks like his company. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms, what does this mean practically? For me, this is really important because I think you and I, Laurent, are constantly struggling. How do you develop somebody who's at the top or very close to the top of a large organization? You can't coach, you can't send him back to business school. So the only way for me, and this is really a key takeaway of the past few years for me, the only way to help a great leader emerge is to help him create a great organization. Mm-hmm. And in the process of doing it, he will transform himself or herself, and the organization will find in his transformation or her transformation the reason and the energy to move itself. So it's a very systemic, again, a very systemic movement where there is a continuous loop between the leader and the organization back and forth.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you. Anne, do you have another question?
Well, I think there are still a couple of minutes left for us. So I would like to know, of course, it will be very important for leaders to put new breath in the organization, especially in these uncertain times that we go through. So what particular qualities, what particular skills does a leader need to have in order to be able to do so?
I will answer with 2 words, and then I will let Marc. I would say courage and humility. You need the courage to take this bold, long-term view that you mentioned, Marc. And you need the humility to let your own organization grow, as you mentioned also. So to me, those are the 2 main qualities that you need. And this will allow you also to look at yourself in the mirror and be ready to change yourself. That's what I would say. But Marc, what would you say then?
You know, let me again confirm here. And by saying that, Laurent, you're using very old words, right? They are the antique virtues, you know, they're 4,000 years old. And for me, they're really important. Why is that? Because in a way, you want a leader to be like developing an athletic view of his life or her life. Because again, it's a long run, right? We're going to Americas. We are Christopher Columbus. We don't know where we're going, but we're going there. And in order to grow from where I am to where I could be, exerting these virtues, and in particular, those 2 are key. There are a few others, but these 2 are key, humility and courage, makes you a greater leader. So it's not only a quality which you need to show so that you can be appointed. It's a discipline you need to exert every day so that you grow to where the world needs you.
Yeah. Thank you, Marc. Anne, still
okay,
one
yes.
left?
I think time is more or less up. But you know what? There will be a thematic roundtable later on tonight. So the questions that will pop up during the day, we will present them this evening during the roundtable. Is that okay with you?
That's perfect. I just would like to thank very much Marc for his contribution. And I would like to say to all the people who are listening to us that really this transformation of yourself in order to help your organization transform itself is a wonderful journey. Not only for the organization, but for yourself too. And I must say, I'm going through it myself all the day. And it's just fantastic. So thank you, Marc, for sharing your experience. And thank you for all who have listened to us.
Very good. Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Anne. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, both of you. And stay healthy, okay? Stay safe. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.